Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by my good friend Andrew McNicol from Breakpoint Labs. Andrew, how you doing, my friend?
Very good today. How are you?
Good, yeah, good. Me and Andrew have been having a bit of a giggle because Andrew just had to relocate his office to his truck in about 2 minutes flat because you're having some maintenance done on the house, aren't you, buddy? And we're sorted, but it's been a bit eventful.
Yep. Got to think on my feet. They're doing the roof. They came early, and I'm like, all right, I can't. Gotta just jump in my truck. But my truck is, I've got a nice truck, so it's comfy, and we can do it in here.
Yeah, cool. So just give Andrew a bit of an intro for the listeners. Currently CTO of Breakpoint Labs. Breakpoint Labs are based in Virginia. Been incorporated since 2015. Andrew's been in security for a long time. Been a SANS mentor. There's loads that we can talk about in terms of kind of leadership and stuff like that. And this episode's all going to be about motivational. Andrew's going to really unpack his learnings over the years and any mistakes you've made. We're going to try and give people a time hack and help people out and really tap into your knowledge, Andrew, really. But yeah, really the place I wanted to start, Andrew, we're going to talk about culture and various bits and bobs, but one place I wanted to start was, I know off air when we were chatting, we talked about your 100% retention rate when it comes to the team, which is just awesome. Talk to me, mate. Talk to me. How does that happen?
Yeah, that is something I'm particularly proud of. If I look at my career and I look at what I've accomplished, I've done a lot of cool projects, and I've certainly accomplished a decent bit. But one of my proudest accomplishments is the fact that, at least on my core team, my pen testers, my red teamers, it's 100% retention rate. And it's been that way for 12 years. BPL was incorporated 8 years ago, but I've had people follow me, both employees and customers, to Breakpoint Labs, and they've stuck with me over the years. So I think I'm doing something right, at least in that regard. And it's definitely something I'm proud of. But I guess one of the things that I think contributes to that, and we talked about a little bit, is like having the right culture and making sure that you're finding the right people. So I like to try to find people that are passion driven and passionate individuals. I don't necessarily put as much focus on past experience. That's great. But if a lot of my hires have been fresh OSCP certified individuals with no prior experience. I think my best engineer came from, he was technically a cookie salesman on his resume. It turns out he was running the company, was a family business, but so he was doing more than that, obviously. But people were saying like he's not in the field, he's not in the industry, he's got no experience. And I was like, he got OSCP on his own and he seems fairly motivated. And talking to him, it was very clear to me that where he wanted to go. So I don't put as much focus on the past experience, but try to understand the individual and their goals and what they've accomplished. OSCP has been one of the things. I think learning on your own time is a big deal in this industry. And if I can see signs of that, like that's almost more important to me than somebody that's been paid to do the job, right, and got the experience through payment. So there is that. Retention rate, we've been remote since inception. And I think one of the things that my team does that I don't think a lot of other teams do, at least when I talk to others in the industry, we actually sit in video chat and we have breakout rooms, but our core water cooler video chat is about 10 to 12 people with my core team. And then we'll do breakout rooms for projects. But that I think is definitely a big factor, is the fact that we still maintain that sort of close connection. And we're not sitting there looking at each other in video chat, but we can unmute and just talk, right? Whether it be to have banter or to have a useful discussion about a project we're working on, or to just ask a question. So there is that. And I think that's important to like maintain the connection with people when you're working remotely.
Yeah, do you know, Andrew? Do you know one thing? I think what you said before. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right. Yeah,
Yeah, you mentioned that people are coming in at a more junior level. So correct me if I'm
possibly. Yeah.
wrong. Yeah, so they're coming in at a more junior level. They've maybe got OSCP already, no particular background in security, but you're picking them up and then you're really developing them. And then in return, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that's getting loyalty in return because you're really developing people over a longer period of time. And is that where a lot of the retention rate comes from, would you say?
I'm sure it's a factor. I definitely think so. The way I look at my business, like it's a services based company. The people are the product. The people are everything. The people are the lifeblood of the company. They're what you're selling. They're the most important aspect. It's not me or my business partners or even the customers. Really, it's the people that are hands behind the keyboard doing the work, and I treat them that way. I think that goes a long way as well, making sure that you have a personal connection. Again, I think a lot of this is hard to do when you're a larger company, but you can certainly have the lower level leaders that are working on those teams have that connection. But I think that is something that is often missed, is building that personal connection and understanding like where they are, what motivates them, what do they want to accomplish, so you can make sure those doors are open and you're continuing to keep that relationship growing. And I'm sure that, like you said, bringing them in from OSCP level and giving them a shot is important. The other thing from a culture perspective that I think is important as well, and it builds on that, is that we don't have a stay in your lane mentality. So I will invite people to business development meetings. I will invite them to other aspects of the business that you might not normally get exposed to unless you're some super senior person. I'll have them on calls with customers if they're free. I just expose them to other aspects of the business, and it makes, I think, them feel a little more involved, because this is the things that I wish I had when I was coming up. So I was like, I try to put those in place now. Like I want it, but when the engineers feel like they have a say in the project, I think that goes a long way. I don't want to get too far ahead, but I do think that ensuring the projects are set up in a way for the engineers to be successful is very important. And we can talk more about that later, but I do think it's a big factor as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I would imagine as well, if people are doing different things, like if they're on a business development, if they're doing something really low level technical, the stimulation levels are going to be much higher as well, because you're not getting pigeonholed, you're not doing the same thing in a really repetitive manner. So I can see how that works. And just to pick you up on the people being the value, I've read, as I'm sure you haven't, I've read so many business books, and the whole value, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about recruitment, the whole value of a business is the people. Essentially, you're buying a set of cohesive people. That's what a business is, isn't it? It's like I say, it's just everything. And then also you mentioned about people doing stuff in their own time. I just think cybersecurity, pen testing, offensive security, it just moves so quick that if people aren't doing stuff in their own time, you're just going to get left behind, aren't you? So doing that, doing stuff before and after. It's one of the things we look at within our hiring process when we're hiring for our clients is what are people doing before and after work, or what are people doing when no one's watching? Because like I said, that's what really makes the difference. But just moving on to the next question, we off air we were talking the other week about leadership style, and obviously you're a leader at the minute, you're leading the team, you're running the business. I want this pod to be beneficial for people leading. Perhaps it's people listening now that are head of pen testing or head of cyber. They're leading a team and they're wanting some tips, pointers, inspiration. I know we talked about you talked about a take the trash out approach, which if you can elaborate on that and give us any leadership tips, Andrew, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think, at least in my opinion, I try to look at who, you have to earn the respect of your engineers, the people you work with. And I think one of the key ways to get that respect is making sure that you take the trash out, you clean the toilets, right? And that basically means doing some of the remedial tasks. So you're not always delegating. It's certainly an important part is to delegate so you can accomplish the bigger picture and make sure the project's successful. But you do need to be doing the hacking as well to some extent, I think, because like you mentioned a second ago, the skills atrophy. So if you're not doing it, you're not going to, unless you're some savant, I don't see you being successful long term. It's going to start to slow down and go away from you. And I think leaders in the cybersecurity industry have to make sure that they are staying technical and giving themselves projects and allowing themselves engineer time on projects, and not just, certainly this works for a small business. I think at the larger companies, maybe it doesn't apply as much, but to be a really good leader in this industry, I think you have to be able to do the work. And I think you also earn your respect of your engineers when, they see you right alongside them in battle, right? They see you right alongside them in the project. And I can't imagine being as effective as I am today with setting up projects, building relations with customers, executing, if I didn't have an intimate understanding of the actual technical side of the work.
Yeah. I was just about to say, I can imagine if you're there on the tools as and when required, I can imagine it gets a different level of respect. And also that kind of, I can imagine that I don't know if there's any issues, exactly how long stuff should take, what should be done, how you can probably have a different level of empathy for different things that are going on because you're in the weeds, in the thick of it. But I can imagine you probably need to have have a balance. So you want to work on it and not in it all the time. It's probably do you think maybe getting a balance of the two works quite nicely?
Yeah, I end up usually doing a solid 50-50 between getting pulled into leadership and getting pulled into PM type stuff and then engineering. And I usually have to fight for maintaining the engineering side. The PM, and there's always a ton of stuff that can come and take over precedence, but I think I make it onus to be the one that is, getting my hands dirty, getting my hand in the weeds, so people follow me, because I don't think they're gonna like. You gotta think, if somebody says do this work and you don't know what you're doing, you might be telling them to do it wrong. They're not going to respect you. They're not going to put forth their best effort. But if you lead by example and run them into battle, so to speak, in the projects, you're going to get a lot more out of it. And I can't imagine myself respecting a leader that didn't know what they're talking about. So I certainly wouldn't expect someone working for me to do that.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that are critical. And back to a little bit of the culture and the balance thing, I also think it's important to not just work your engineers on projects billable. We don't try to get our engineers to 100% billable. I keep research and development time into my engineers' schedules, and I think that's really important as well, so they don't feel that they're constantly burdened with a project here and there. They have time to relax, catch their breath, do some research and study, think about some new tools, how we can improve our TTPs, what can we do better, faster, stronger. I think that's really important as well. But that kind of goes back in hand to making sure that you allocate your time properly.
Yeah. Also, as well, thanks, Andrew. Also, as well, when you talk about doing the hacking, getting back on the tools, like obviously that is the fun bit. And I've had it so many times where I'm talking to various guys and girls about a management position, and literally now I'm like, even though it's actually disadvantageous for me in terms of a recruitment perspective, I'm like, are you sure you want to go into management? Because the amount of times I've had it where people have gone into management and then they miss being on the tools. So I can imagine from your own perspective, jumping back in the weeds, I think you probably have more fun is what I'm trying to say, because it's obviously that is the fun bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So I'm here because I certainly like interacting with people and working on cool projects, but definitely part of it is I picked this field, and I picked this just because it was my interest. I remember I was initially shown computer hacking when I entered IT in general, like just doing help desk, and I saw the security engineer for the company at the time hack a computer with an SMB exploit, and it blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, technology is very different than how I understand it. And ever since that moment, it's been this interest of mine and this thing that's pulled me. And I think that, so again, the leaders and managers and PMs and such at my company also maintain technical. There's only a handful of folks that aren't technical at Breakpoint Labs. It's a very small percentage, when they're doing HR functions and they're not necessarily doing a customer-facing role. But if you're customer-facing, you're usually meeting the baseline technical requirements and able to execute and maintaining that. So our brand is such that people come to us for the hard technical problems. So we got to make sure that we're putting the right people in place.
Yeah, cool. I don't know if you can put a figure on it, but you briefly mentioned about 5 minutes ago about the team not being 100% billable. What do you think, in percentage terms, is the optimal rate to stay commercially strong, but also keep the team happy and keep morale high?
Yeah, 70-30 is what I aim for, and that's what I think is pretty good. You do also need to make sure, so too much R&D time is bad too, because they'll get bored. You need to be able to have ways to apply the skills and stuff that they're learning. The people that, if you're hiring the right folks, they want to get their hands in the weeds. They want to do projects. So I found 70-30 to be a pretty good thing to aim towards, like in terms of 70% billable, 30% R&D overhead type strategy. So when I'm looking at planning my resources, that is usually what I aim for. That split.
Yeah, cool. No, that's useful to know especially for fellow business owners listening. That's definitely useful to know. And then in terms of the research time, is that planned by you? Do they get a lot of, or do they plan it themselves? Is it a mixture, or is that planned out?
That's a good question. So what we do as a team is we try to map out all the different areas, because there's a lot of specializations in cyber, and there's even more so when you look at pen testing and red teaming and hacking. And we try to say, okay, first we look at where's our strengths, where's our weaknesses, and then we try to map people to those different buckets, and they become the subject matter experts in those areas. They can research whatever they want in those 30% on that time. So whatever they're interested in, because I have a firm believing that if you're interested in a topic, at least I'm the type of person that if I get on a topic, I can't get my mind off of it. I have to follow it through. So they're allowed to do whatever research they want. But I do have people assigned to certain subject matter areas, and they're the expert. They're the go-to person. They're the problem solver. So if something's happening in Active Directory and we're looking at certificates, I got a guy that I go to help me troubleshoot Active Directory certificate exploitation. And it isn't me, right? I also know that, hey, I'm not the guy for that. I go to my guy for that. And I do think that also helps with retention because it gives them ownership and a purpose. It gives them like, this is where I stand. I think when you're in the industry, there's so much to focus on. You tend to get an idea that you're specializing overall, but you don't feel that you're good in any one thing. There tends to be this imposter syndrome that happens in the field very often in this industry where you compare yourself to the top 0.1% and think you're not great. So basically giving people areas that they are the expert. They're the man. I go to them or the woman, right? And I go to them and I rely on them. I think that helps a lot. And that's generally where the research takes place. But again, they can research wherever they want, wherever their heart's content, because I know personally how hard it is to pull your mind off the topic.
Yeah, no, definitely. You sound like you might be a little bit like me in terms of you're an obsessive chap, maybe, once you get going.
Yeah, it's good and bad, right? It's good and bad.
And
over the years, I've learned to hone us. So I actually dropped out of college for a video game before, to be honest, like back in the day, right? So my focus can get on things for good or bad, and I have to aim my attention. But if I aim my attention in the right directions, I can do good things. But if it's aimed towards World of Warcraft, as I learned when I was in my college days many moons ago, it maybe isn't the best.
Yeah, have some fun, though.
Yeah, the balance, but yeah, so it's certainly very similar to you, though. It's where it's attention, you can get locked in. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just got to be channeled in the right way. But yeah, so just to unpack what you said. So basically, if they're red teaming, they might be going off in research time and building their own C2s. And obviously, you've got guys and girls that are, let's say, someone's mega at AD, someone else is maybe really drilling down into pen testing the cloud and so on and so forth. But like you say, you're right. Just pen testing alone, that's a hell of a broad term. I said there's so much within that. But yeah, cool. I think that brings us quite nice, talking the getting fixated on stuff, and brings us quite nicely on to my next question, which is about burnout, which I know me and you have spoke about before, and that's very much a real thing, especially in the InfoSec game. Have you got any kind of thoughts on burnout, tips for avoiding it, things that kind of the listeners should and shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, so I think in any industry where you're passion driven and it's like a hobby, it's something that you love to do, you can get burned out because it's something that you're interested in. So you always want to do it. It always releases that dopamine hit in your brain. You like what you're doing. You want to do it. So you're driven to work. And I speak from when I got burned out. I used to be way more of a workaholic than I am today. I still work hard, don't get me wrong, but I was obsessed with it. And that was the most important thing in my life. And I can't say that today. I can say that I've got a better balance because I think you just mentioned it's important to have balance. So when I talk to people in the industry, especially new folks, they've got all this motivation and this eagerness, and it's great. Harness it and use it. And I certainly want them to go forward and do as best they can, but you also have to pay mind to your own mental health in terms of the burnout, because it's a lot easier to avoid a burnout than it is to dig out of a burnout. So once you do get burned out, it is very difficult, I found, to pull yourself out of that moment. So you have to do things that avoid a burnout. And I think that exercise is a huge part of that. In my opinion, I encourage my team members to exercise and go out, whether it's walk, lift weights, ride a bike, get some physical activity daily, get some sun exposure daily, do these things for your own health, eat healthy. So I definitely encourage all these types of aspects within my engineers that work with me. We talk about sharing tips. We have like a health channel and we do that kind of stuff. But I think that's important to randomly, if you're slow, you don't have much going on, you're like, hey, do you guys want to go take a quick walk? Let's go outside and take a quick walk, get some sun, get some vitamin D, and everybody take a quick little break. So I think you have to build those in. I think you have to build that time in, because all too often it gets ignored. And especially if you're passion driven and you're focused, you're like getting off work, you're studying. And I think it's just mindful to like schedule in some fun, right? So we always schedule in the work. You always put the calendar events on there for the work, and you always schedule the work, but you often don't schedule the fun, and it doesn't happen. So being mindful of that. If you're slow, take a half day on a Friday, And I had the mindset of we work hard, play hard, right? And it definitely yin yang. So if we're busy, we maybe work a little longer. If we're slow, we ebb and flow that way and we get off a little earlier. So it's definitely, I think it's important to flow both directions. And I think when I first started, I was only flowing one direction and I was putting full focus on work being the most important thing and not physical health or mental health and family, friends, but all that stuff's just as important to make sure that you're your best self for when you're on the job.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the thing as well, Andrew, some people might think, oh, some of it maybe sound quite simplistic, but how many people out there are not doing that stuff? And also, I know from obviously nature of what I do for a living, I talking to people all day, every day, and the amount of people that have had issues and have really, like you say, gone the other side and have had to dig themselves out. It's a really common thing. Like I say, it needs mention. I like the idea of actually scheduling it. Like literally putting the gym and just block booking it out for an hour. I don't do that, but that sounds like a good idea because, like I said, the Zooms go in there, the meetings go in there, everything else does. So why not?
And I like to make daily checklists. So every day I wake up, take a cold shower. I'm going on a walk, doing a quick meditation before I start work. I'm doing cardio in my lunch hour. I'm working out, lifting weights when I get off work. Like I try to build these mental and physical health things into my day, and I have a checklist, and it helps me because all that sounds super, super easy to do. How many people have set a goal to work out or have a mental eat healthy? It's easy to eat healthy. It's easy to work out, but is it easy to do every day for 90 days with respective breaks in there for recovery? No, it's not, right? It isn't. Like it's much harder to do day in, day out. Having it be part of your day to set goals for the mental and physical health activities, I think is important.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's easy to do, but it's easy not to do. It's really easy to drop out of it. But yeah, definitely. Do you know InfoSec Pat, by the way, is on YouTube? Patrick Gorman. He's mad for the gym as well. I don't know if it's Patrick.
Oh, yeah, I think I haven't consumed too much of his stuff, but I've heard of him. Yeah.
No, he loves the gym. Yeah, I think that actually ties on with where we're going to go next. We talked about taking a longer term approach. I know since you've started Breakpoint Labs, it's all been about taking that longer term view on things. Can you give us some examples of how taking a long term approach has benefited you in your career, how it's benefited your business, and perhaps if you could give us some examples as well, that'd be cool.
Yeah, when you mention long term approach, do you mean like with customer acquisition, like customers, or just try to get a better frame on that one?
I think with customers, I think business in general, your career as a whole, just I'm all for it. And since I've done the pod, I've really taken on board what, I like look at you being successful now. I had Brad on from FR Secure, and he's taking a really long-term approach. And I know they're really busy. I know you're busy. And this long-term approach really comes through from a lot of people that are doing well in the industry. So it just be to hear more on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I just want to caveat my success is really the people around me. I certainly work hard, but I wouldn't be where I am today, like without my business partners and my engineers. So my success is just a product of the environment and not like necessarily just me. I just want to make sure that's clear. I didn't say that earlier, but it's important, I think, it's a team approach. It's not me individually. But in that same mindset, I guess with the long term, we do treat every customer the same. We have this quality standard that I work very hard to uphold. So whether we have a small project that might be $10,000 or we have a major multi-million-dollar DoD contract, we're going to bring the same level of quality. That's really important to me. So when customers come and buy Breakpoint Lab services, they know what they're getting. And you can often get judged by your worst moments. So you really need to make sure that you're upholding your standard, whatever your standard might be. So we offer high-end services, so we have to really meet the mark with quality. Other people's business approaches might not be that way, but that's ours, right? Ours is to really, the niche is high-end cybersecurity services, but we do it in a way that I'm very understanding, right? So I have a lot of small customers that are like higher ed, or places that don't quite have the budget of government or a large organization. So I'm very understanding with that, and I ebb and flow both ways, and I'm not trying to kill people on price. I'm listening to them, and I'm trying to find ways to help them have an impactful project and return on investment within their own resource constraints for financial purposes. But I definitely think that's a huge part of it. If you go to Fogo de Chao or some fancy restaurant, or you buy a high-end car, you expect quality. So I like to relate myself to that, where people are coming to me and buying a Lamborghini or a Mercedes, BMW, right? They're buying a higher end vehicle. and they expect quality and performance. So I'm trying to bring that to bear. Where I try to help them is I try not to be the price of the Lamborghini, right? Or the BMW. I really do try to, and this is not marketing, but being that I am an owner and I set prices of things and work on that side of it, it is important to me one of the reason we started Breakpoint Labs was to break the cycle. That was one of our things that we set out to do. And that cycle was people charging incredible amounts of money and then doing mediocre work. I saw it all too often. And I personally had taken control over a very critical system that I should not have been able to do, and nobody cared because it wasn't tied to a CVE. It was an O-Day, but the management there didn't understand that. And that point, I realized I got to do something else. This is incredible. This is an incredible finding. It's not getting appreciated. The quality's there, but they don't care. They just want to get to the next project. So the long term, I think, falls back to quality, how you treat your people, how you treat your customers, and the end product you're delivering.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for that, Andrew. So just to pick you up on that last point there about when you found a 0 day and no one cares. I've heard that before. That's common. I've spoken to loads of pen testers where it's happened to them before, and it's a real bugbear of people. So I suppose that comes from when you're qualifying your clients. Are you saying you'd only really want to partner with, and I like the idea of this, but only partnering with people that genuinely care about security? They're not just trying to tick a box. They actually really want to improve the security posture, like genuinely.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I did want to make sure that was covered, is that you have to qualify the customer too, to make sure you're taking the right projects. Because if you do, what I see happen so often in the industry is that pen testers get forced into compliance work. They get forced into doing not pen testing. And that happens. That's going to happen, right? When you're running a cybersecurity practice, you're going to have that happen in some blend, because nothing's ever usually cut and dry. There's always a blend for the customer and what makes the most sense for them, right? There's some vulnerability assessment aspects, and there's some pen testing aspects. There's some red team aspects. It's certainly, at least for us, it's a blended approach based on the customer security, like maturity. We obviously aren't going to go in and take a red teaming approach to a place that is very new. But I do see it happen all too often because there tends to be a lot more money in the compliance game than pen testing game. And people and customers, businesses rather, are like, I want to make the money, so I got to do. So pen tester, go do compliance work. And that pen tester is not fulfilled. They're not happy. They feel like me back when I found that O-Day and nobody cared because it wasn't a CVE. And that kind of goes back to the leadership not understanding the work. It was like, you're my leader and you don't understand how cool this is, for one, but how important it is for the customer to fix it. I couldn't believe it. And it was good talent that left. Like, I was consider myself a talented individual and I left. So it really falls back to a lot of different aspects. When you set the projects up for success, part of that is definitely talking to them. I know I had a customer recently who wanted to pay me money and couldn't understand why I take it from them. And they were trying to set a project up in a way that didn't make sense technically at all, but they wanted their product to look not vulnerable. They sold up the security product and he wanted to show it wasn't hackable and there's no risk. And long story short is we designed a project over a month or so of planning that would be a fair shake of things. We'll take a fair shake at your security appliance or your product. They wanted to set it up in a way that just made them look awesome. And it was because there'd be no way to win. They were setting it up in a way that no possible way. It didn't make any sense. It really didn't make any sense. I won't go into specifics, but it was crazy. And they wanted to pay me money. And they said, I'll pay you whatever you want. And I said, I don't want to take it. Like, I don't care, because it's going to make my engineers feel bad. The two engineers I was going to put on it were my best and brightest, because I was saying, hey, listen, if you want to give this unhackable product a go at it, I'm going to put my engineer who came out of the NSA and my engineer who writes our C2, custom C2 plugin. We're going to put my best and brightest at it. They would have been remiss. They would have been in a terrible mood if I forced them to do it. And because I'd be like, well, they're paying us, so just go do it, get the checkbox, show them some scans and that there's no vulnerabilities. I know it doesn't make sense, but hey, it's a payday. I refused, because it goes back to that quality. I'm not going to put my name on something that doesn't meet our quality standard. And the customer clearly had not honest intentions. They wanted to take this report that we made and market it with it, which would have hurt our brand, and it would have also contributed to a lie, right? There's nothing out there that's invulnerable. There's nothing out there that doesn't have an attack vector or risk. And especially in security, right? You see these blinky boxes that are sold like, it's going to keep you protected. You won't get hacked with this blinky box. And It's just not the reality. So we don't want to take part in that game. And that's why if we find a customer that's like that, we want to dodge that project, even if there's money behind it.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, thanks for that, mate. And listen, like I say, that definitely ties into the long term approach. You've echoed a few things that I've been. There's one really successful guy in recruitment that's a bit of a mentor for me, and his exact words to me were, he goes, "You'll be ultimately successful when you learn to say no and when you learn to walk away." I say that's when you'll really move forward. Because I don't know if you've had the same experience. I think if you take on those kind of nightmare type scenarios, I can imagine that it's just you'll end up running around the houses. Like I say, team are annoyed. I can imagine that all sorts of kind of hassles come with it. So, yeah, learning to say no. Again, it ties in with taking a long term approach. And like you said, if it's not done culture wise, things just get shattered. Team get annoyed. Retention rates are out the window. So it ties quite nicely in with the recruiting and the culture piece as well. It makes a lot of sense when you unpack it and strip it back. But thanks for that, mate. If we move on to culture at Breakpoint Labs, I know we've talked about it a bit. If I'm listening now and I'm thinking, do you know what, Breakpoint Labs, what's it like to work there? What makes things different? What's the culture really? Can you give us a bit of an insight into what things are like internally?
Yeah, I guess the culture is something that I particularly find very important in the company, or a company when you're working with it. Is we're technology geeks at our core, and we love security. We love what we do. And that is in the air, right? That's infectious. That's something that is, you feel. Just like when you go to a security conference, you can feel an energy. You can feel there's a lot of ideas and research and people wanting to learn. And that's where the culture that we want to foster. And I say this, anybody in the company can take a look at some of the projects I'm working on, and if they say they want to do pen testing, because we have incident response, we have people that are doing network traffic analysis, we have people that are just developers. Not everybody's a pen tester here. That just happens to be the business unit that I lead. So with that, there's a lot of crossover, and some people are interested, and I've pulled people from other teams to show them ride-alongs on pen testing, and there's people that work with me now to train, and I just kind of screen share what I do with commentary, and I try to be a little funny. And it's that kind of vibe where it's like, hey, if you want to learn, let's learn. Let's screen share. Let me execute this web application pen test, and I'll tell you as I go. Let's pull this request up in Burp and start modifying stuff, send it to Intruder, and here's why I'm doing this. I talk through it. So there's that type of continuous learning. There's no stay in your lane. If you want to grow, let's find a path for you. Let's see how that, it might not happen today, but let's figure out a way to get you there. And I've actually had people say, hey, they want to do certain projects, and I try to develop business around that, because again, the most important thing for me is my people, right? So I want to keep my guys. I want to make sure that they're happy and they're engaged. And one of the things that we started to do more over the last years is physical security assessments, which is a ton of fun. And it's a lot more rare. That's not quite as big of a booming industry as the cyber side, but it's super fun. So we've now put more effort and onus in training our guys with physical and doing like RFID badge hacking and physically breaking into places with projects. And I pitch it to customers. I explain the benefit, right? And part of this is because it is a good need for the customer. It is something that's often overlooked, but I also know that my guys want to do it, right? So it's going back to that culture of setting up fun projects and making sure that their people don't have to feel this stay in your lane. That was one of the things that always bothered me in my past companies, is I was the kind of guy that wanted to sprint, run 1,000,000 miles an hour and get into so many different things. And there was this approach, you can't do that. You're not the pen tester. But I want to be a pen tester. I want to be a pen tester. You're not the pen tester. You're looking at packets. So look at packets. And I was like, man, I feel like I could be more impactful, right? So I try to hear people out in the company and give them shots. And one of the usually things at least for pen testing example, is I say, hey, OSCP, right? If you want a pen test, this is how you do it. Go check this training out. And that's usually a good way to feel for it, because pen testing on the surface sounds fun. It sounds awesome, but it's got some not fun parts of the job too. And OSCP is a good barrier of entry, I find. But anyway, that's a overlapping culture, is that, hey, you don't have to stay in your lane. We want to continuously learn. And at the end of the day, we're all people that love security. Cool. That's what I think overall, that's the culture I could think of.
No, thank you. There's a few bits there that I was just going to mention. At the top of the show, you mentioned about if you're passionate about something, you're better at it, you'll really get involved with it. And that kind of ties in. So you're almost doing it like the opposite way around in a bit. So you're going out there and winning business that the team are massively passionate about. So you'll go after a particular project because say Jimmy on the team loves this, that, and the other. That's like a bit of a unique way of doing it. I would say that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely not our only business development strategy, but I personally try to line projects up that I find will be fun for my guys. And I've had a guy that developed to be now more of a full-time offensive developer. And we had to build a need for that to be full-time doing that, but he wanted to do it. So we worked over the years to get that set up, and he's now doing that today. And it's really beneficial to the team having him there in that more full-time developer capacity. So yeah, it is definitely contributes to the retention rate as well, as if you're trying to set up good projects for people and you're not just throwing them at compliance work and trying to capitalize on whatever dollars you can get. For me, it's more about the people than it is about the money and what the company brings in terms of dollars.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so that guy, so is he building tools? The offensive developer?
That is definitely my main guy, Luke. Definitely one of my main guys. He builds a lot of our tools, capabilities, tweaks a lot of our stuff. A lot of the times, it just requires a little tweaking. Open source project needs a little tweaking to get past EDR. He's the guy that I'll usually have him take our C2 and get it bypassing EDR. Yeah, he's very beneficial, but we didn't have a situation where we could have a full-time developer when we were first starting out, a small company. We had to get going, and now we're finally at a point where we have that. And I actively put that opportunity for him, right? Yes, we needed it, but we could get by without a full-time developer at that time, but we basically set things up and projects up that now we need a full-time developer, and it's helping him out. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine he loves that. I know people that would love that. I can imagine he loves
Yeah, it's not for me. It's not for me. I do to write some Python code, but I'm not the hardcore guy that wants to get in and bypass EDRs. I'm very happy and fortunate to have Luke to do that for me. But yeah, if it's your passion, it's what you want to do, then yeah, we got to get the door opened.
Yeah. Cool. Wicked. Thanks, mate. Next question then, Andrew. Which book, podcast have you read or listened to at any point that's had the biggest, most positive impact on your career?
Yeah, I don't listen to a lot today. I should listen to more. That's one of my things I'm improving right now, is like trying to take a dive into more podcast content. But I do tend to focus on, I came up from the Paul.com security days. So I came up listening to Paul Asadorian, and that was a pretty big influential setting the stage for, I saw that as like a group of guys that were really passionate security geeks, and it inspired me. So that was a pretty big one coming up.
Is that still about? Is that still?
No,
accessible?
I don't think Paul does it any longer now. But that's just an example of what came up. It was influential for me. Today, I tend to listen to a little more motivational stuff. I get my technical content from just the internet, and I tend to, if I'm looking at a podcast, it tends to be more like Jocko or Real AF with Andy Frisilla, more motivational stuff. But there's still a lot of good technical stuff out there, podcast wise. I just need to probably do a little better job jumping into them these days. I haven't really consumed good InfoSec podcasts as of late. And then I'm a terrible book reader, really bad. I try to read books. I just never really can do it. I really do try, but it just never happens. So I don't have the attention span to sit down and read a book and turn a page. I love to read and I love to consume knowledge. It just, in the book form, is not for me. I like to go at my own pace and not be page. I can't do it. I've tried.
Yeah, the thing is, it's finding the time as well to sit there with a book. For me, probably similar to you, it's much better for me to just stick the AirPods in and just put something on when I'm in the gym or when I'm walking around. But yeah, to sit there with the book, it's quite a big commitment.
Yeah, so I can't say I've read a lot of good books. And I also don't think necessarily like good technical content comes out in books these days, but I'm obviously maybe not the best to say that since I don't read books that much. But I do consume a lot of just general stuff online and keep up with things, but it's just not through those forums usually. But I am looking for some good security podcasts to start to do. I used to run one, Primal Security Podcast. Again, stopped doing that when Breakpoint Labs started, because I had to put my time into certain things and I had to allocate times away from certain things. But yeah, I used to be way more connected in the podcast space than I am today, just out of having to pick and choose where my time gets spent.
Yeah, cool. So I'll post them in the show notes. So Jarcon and Real AF, they're mega learning.
Motivational ones, not InfoSec.
Oh, motivational, sorry. Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll whack them in the show notes anyway. So I'll move on to the next question. What characteristics do you believe makes up a highly successful pen tester or cybersecurity professional in today's market, and what do you think is the most underrated skill in today's market?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I do think the answer is very varied. And so a lot of people in cybersecurity are video game people, so I'm thinking they might get this analogy that I often use. I was a big MMO player. The specific game was World of Warcraft, but the mechanics of the game tie over to like Dungeons and Dragons and like other games of that genre. And the idea is basically you build a team. Not everybody on the team is a damage doer. Not everyone on the team has the same role. Everybody fills a complementary role to accomplish the big mission. So you have a tank, a DPS, and a healer. Generally, there's the high, broad spectrum of people. So I try to say that, yeah, like I consider myself a tank in this situation where I'm more customer facing and I lead the room. I have more of a presence that's loud. People, when I'm in the room or even in the video chat, right? It's very obvious. I talk a lot, good, better, and different. There's also people that are more of a DPS class, which they're quiet. They don't say much, but they get a lot of good damage done. And they maybe get the direction from the tank, right? They know which mob to attack because the tank's on it. And they can come by and really unload their talents there. But I don't take the DPS. And this is another thing I think is important. I don't take that DPS class, the person that's really technical, but maybe lacks the interpersonal skills, and force them to like present and interact with the customer quite as much. I try to realize what strengths that people have and best utilize those strengths. And if they have some weaknesses, those might be just weaknesses that they have, right? Some people aren't good communicators. Sure, you can work on it, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be the best presenter. They get incredible anxiety talking to customers, but they're amazing on the keyboard. Utilizing people to those different strengths and weaknesses, I think, is a good, important thing for leadership. I would say that the most important thing is just passion for learning. If you have that, you're solid. Because what happened 5 years ago is very different than what happens today. So you have to keep learning. If you don't love learning, you're in the wrong field. Just that is, you're definitely in the case, right? I always say, I think I'm learning more than people in this industry have to learn more than doctors, because the medical industry doesn't quite change as quickly as cyber. So you're always studying, you're always learning. And I think that has to be something you inherently love to do.
Yeah.
I think communication skills and interpersonal skills are often underrated. You often see that on a resume, and it's like, yeah, sure, you can write well and talk, sure, okay, whatever. But but you can code this language. Like, you tend to put a lot of onus on technical skills, and I think that's important. Like that, not to turn a blind eye to that. You got to make sure that you're building your team right, and you don't want to assemble everybody be DPS, and then because you're not going to communicate effectively with the customer, and then it's going to hurt your end product. So you got to make sure you have your tank, your DPS, and your healer class. You've assembled complementary skill sets to the team to make sure that you're delivering impactful. And also, hey, my guys that are the DPS, they love it. They don't have to talk to the customers. They know they can lean on me or another tank in my company to go talk to the customer. They can do what they love to do and put their heads down. So that I think is probably the biggest thing for the market, is like understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and then making sure that you're in an environment that those get utilized properly.
Yeah, cool. So we've basically got, thanks, Andrew. So we've got communication, learning, ability to learn, desire to learn, really playing to your strengths, knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. Is that everything?
Yeah.
Cool, man. No, very good, very good. So career progression, I know it's just really high on the agenda for pretty much everyone. Everyone really gets a feel-good factor and from having that forward momentum and moving forward. You've had a lot of career progression over the years, Andrew. What 3 tips have you got for everyone listening that wants to maximize career growth, progression?
Yeah, okay. So what works well for me, and I didn't always have this mentality, but what I've learned over the years is, we talked about it a little bit, is to set those small daily goals. I think that's an important point for your career, is you're setting your day up and you're doing these small things day in, day out that add up to being a really huge thing over time. So making sure you're setting these goals, and I like to use I'm a checklist fan. I literally have a whiteboard by my desk that I have my day mapped out of what I want to get done, high level, right? What do I want to accomplish for the day? There's some structure that doesn't change. I always work out at trying to eat healthy and things like that. But then there's specific things for the day that I want to get done. But that helps me. So that's one of my things for career progression I think is really helpful, is like setting those small daily goals. I use a checklist on a whiteboard. You could use whatever, but that's a very helpful thing. The other thing I think is important is to find a mentor. I think that's pretty generic, but really find somebody that cares about your career progression and can be there to help you. I think you're going to get so much more out of work so faster if you can. So find somebody, even if you're at your company, reach out to somebody that is where you want to be and see if they'd be open to mentoring. I think that this industry tends to be more interpersonal skilled people, and they don't communication comes second. Reach out and try to build that relationship with somebody that's senior or wherever you want to get to. And I think that's important. And then the third thing, and I remind myself of this every day because I think it's important, is that when I talk to people, I talk to a lot of people that are trying to get in the industry. That happens. It's a very common thing that I'm sure you do too. And they always say, I'm interested, but I can't do that. I'm 30. I'm in my 30s, right? I didn't get started. I didn't go to school for it. That mindset, you got to stop. So what I tell people is I say something I tell myself every day, and it's written on my whiteboard, is lesser people have done more. So it means to me, I'm saying like a lesser man has done more. So someone lesser than me has accomplished more. I remind myself that. If you look back at history, it's often helpful too, because you can see some of the amazing things people in history have done. And it's, wow, I can accomplish today's task. I said this guy mapped the Oregon Trail before we had any technology, right? And he walked across the United States before it was even a thing. So there are lesser men have done more, right? So if you maintain that mindset, you can accomplish it. I think that's where you're starting out to be successful. Never think something's impossible. So definitely, if you want to get into cyber or if you want to go somewhere in your career, you have to stop thinking that you can't get there and start setting that as a goal and work towards it.
Yeah, cool. I like that as well. Lesser men have done more. I think as well, it's like, I've seen it over the years as well. So many people get forward in life and do things in life because they're just going out there and just doing the damn thing. They're actually just going out there and doing it. And I think as well, if you're not as good, if you're not great at something at first, you're never meant to be amazing at something the first time you did it. Like I can imagine the first time you hacked a web app, first time you hacked a web app probably weren't the best. I can imagine now you can just probably do web app stuff in your sleep. It's like I say, it's just actually just sometimes just putting one foot in front of the other. Just to pick you up on one point now, Joe, I think the mentor piece, I think that's absolutely huge. If I'm listening now and I'm thinking, listen, that all sounds great, but I haven't got a mentor at the minute.
Yeah.
What do you reckon is the best way to approach one, find one, get one?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that want to help. I think generally, and it's just the communication is the breakdown, right? So it's not that there are people that are willing to be a mentor, but there's just not that the communication is in place. I think the best way is maybe look internally wherever you're working in your organization, if you can. And I remember I was so hungry for a mentor back in the day. I went through LinkedIn and I sent out like 100 emails to pen testers.
Love that.
And I got no replies. It was bad. The turnout was bad, right? But so that probably isn't the best forum, but try. You got to try. You got to reach out to people. They want to do it. But as with most things, the missing component, at least with my wife and me, tends to be communication, right? Like the problem just got broke down because we didn't communicate, right? It's usually on my end, right? She said something, I didn't hear it. But long story short is communication. I think that's the issue here, is that people want to help, but you have to reach out. Easier way is there are a lot of Discord groups out there. You can start to join them based on your interest and talk and open the door, and then you can learn a bunch through those mediums, and you can try to find mentors through those mediums. My developer grew his skill set off of various Discord groups and just like joining them based on what he was trying to learn, and he's found mentors that way. So that's an option, is like looking for online communities and just reaching out. But again, you have to not be afraid to reach out and ask. And I think all too often that's the breakdown, is they're like, I'm afraid to ask, I'm afraid to, and you got to get over that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Don't worry if you don't know, Andrew, but on the Discord groups, we can ping it in the show notes after if you don't know off the top.
Yeah, we can reach out to Luke and get his feedback. I only mentioned that because he had mentioned that to me yesterday. We were talking a little bit about just his career and such yesterday, and he was saying how much benefit he's gotten from these random people he met online. And I'm like, yeah, that is true. Like even in gaming community, you can meet a lot of random people online and build these connections that you otherwise wouldn't have made. I do think it's certainly easier to look internally to your organization first. If you have at a company that has somebody working in the role you want to get to, send them an email and just say, hey, I really admire what you've done, and I would love to get to where you are. Would you be open to having a quick conversation with me? Start out with that quick chat over coffee or something, that quick interaction. What I found is people generally want to help, especially that type of person, that high performer person that you're probably trying to reach for. They generally want to help. It's just the issue is that that communication isn't there. So be the spark to light the fire.
Yeah, definitely. And what I've found as well is when you approach people that have had a lot of success and are later down the road in the career, you often find they're actually looking for an additional sense of purpose and that mentorship can give them it. The 100 emails thing, I love that, because it's like setting up this podcast. I think in the commercial world, like, everyone is so busy, and you've got to reach out to people. I think, so my thing is, like, really polite but really persistent, and it's people are just like, I can't remember how many times I messaged you, mate, but it
Yeah. I was laughing, Thomas, because that's how we got here today. I got to be honest with you. I respect the brute force technique, because I said to myself, I was like, when I'm trying to break into an account, I have to try endlessly for days on end or weeks on end, right? Depending on what it is, or even if it's blind SQL injection or something, it takes a long time. And I'm here. I was like, he's brute forcing, and this is great. This is a valuable hacking skill that he didn't give up. Right, he's not giving up. So I said, I'm going to throw him a bone. I'm going to take time out and do this, because he did not give up. I was like inspired at the right moment by your relentless approach. And I was like, this is great. And it was respectful. Like you said, it wasn't like you were coming off salesy. You weren't coming off, and I get a lot of that. It wasn't, the message wasn't turning me off. It was just that I was busy. But once it got to me, I was like, this guy has really tried, and I want to be a part of that experience for him.
Yeah, thank you, mate. No, thank you, mate. And I think, I've actually tracked it, Andrew. When the response rate on third, fourth, fifth time of reaching out to someone, not straight away, you've got to obviously leave some gaps or people just get annoyed. But I've found if you leave a bit of time and reach out on multiple occasions, the response rate rapidly goes up. Not a lot of people come back on the first time, I don't think, in the commercial world, because they're just too busy. And then I think the other thing to add on it is bit of personalization as well. I think you mentioned it. If you're reaching out via email, show that you've actually done a bit of recon, and it's not just a copy and paste job. Because I can imagine people out there just flinging out, especially in like today's world with AI and automation, it's so easy just to blanket email thousands of people, and that needs to be avoided, I think.
Yeah, and the reason I didn't, to speak to that point, the reason I didn't initially respond to your emails, that I get hit by recruiters almost 20 times a week, give or take, right? Like, it's multiple a day. To like, recruit for Breakpoint Labs, I want to recruit for your company, I want to recruit. And I'm like, it falls into this mess that I can't possibly pay attention to, because that's all I'd be paying attention to. So you initially hit that in my mind, recruiter, I'm ignoring it, recruiter, I'm ignoring it. And I finally saw the personalized message and was like, oh, this isn't about that. He just wants to help people, and he's got a good thing going here, and I want to be a part of that. So that's, unfortunately, I would say, the sales and marketing, especially with recruiting, is a hard one, because you have people that are tainting the communication channels with spam.
Yeah,
sales.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Like I said, there's just so much noise out there at the minute. I think, like I say, recruitment definitely, but across multiple industries. So yeah, you've got to be different, and like I say, the personalised touch goes a long way. But I say this most weeks, Andrew. I know I promised you an hour. We've already gone over, and I know we were chatting off air before.
It's not surprising to me, because I talk a lot.
Listen, mate, it's been good. It's been enjoyable. It's definitely been helpful. Is there anything that we've missed, or any other points we need to go over before we wrap up?
There's only one, and I think it breaks down to just what I haven't realized this until recently. But if you look at, I would say my key component for success and for my own life and my own career has been, my main focus is helping other people, and it rebounds usually with extra momentum. So I go out of my way to help people, and that's my focus. Is if I'm helping them, that's the most important thing, and it's rebounded. I would not have been able to start my company if I didn't have great business partners who are amazing and do things that I can't do, and they help me. And so it's one of those things that I think, if you boil it down, if you could think about how can I help people each day and make a goal to help somebody in a certain way each day, make that one of your daily tasks you're looking at, I think it will add up over time and really start to rebound in your life in a positive direction.
Yeah, wicked, mate. I love that, and I think that's a good place to finish, Andrew. And listen, I know you're a busy man, so thanks for your time. I'm going to let you get back to the house maintenance. I hope the roof's okay. And
it'll be interesting working with the banging. I think I'm going to have to relocate the office for today at least. I won't be able to think with the banging. I tend to have a hard time. There's small noises going on. This is like a banging sound. Or maybe it's a good day to, like we talked about, work hard, play hard, and take the day off. I don't know. We'll see. I got to check my calendar, but I think I've got one sales call. That's about it. But yeah, we'll see. But anyway, it was great talking with you, Thomas. Like I said, this call was all about like soft skills, motivational stuff, and certainly would love to dive in the weeds and talk more technical content in the future if it comes up, if there's an interest. I'm a big Active Directory nerd, if you will. I love abusing Active Directory to get full permissions over the environment or achieve some cool thing. So yeah, we can definitely talk. I also love web application security. So there's a lot of different directions, but down the road for future ideas.
Yeah, definitely. ADs are just, I just think, you all know more than me, mate, but ADs are just so often vulnerable these days, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. I think it comes down to it's a rat's nest of permissions, and people don't. There's not really a good way to secure it and set it up. And then over a decade or 2 decades, you've got all this rat's nest of permissions that needs to get unwound and looked at. And it just, I love it. I love Active Directory because it's a feature-rich environment for me to have fun in. It's a playground. It's not, it accomplishes an important thing, but it is very fun. I'm bummed out if I do a pen test, there's no AD in scope.
Yeah, no, definitely, mate. Yeah, very good, Andrew. Okay, but listen, I'm gonna hit stop recording now. If we just stay on the line, because I've just got to wait for it to load, but I'll stop recording now and say goodbye to the listeners and just thank you one last time while we're still on. So thank you, my friend.
Absolutely, thanks.